This cop thought. She was just another black woman until she pulled out the badge that could end his job. He thought she was just another face in the crowd. Just another black woman he could intimidate, question, control. But what happened next shattered his illusion and flipped the power dynamic in one breathtaking moment. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply reached into her bag. And when that badge glinted in the light, everything changed. What began as a routine stop turned into a reckoning. Because this wasn't just a traffic stop, this was a test of justice, a moment where arrogance met accountability. And lost. If you've ever doubted that quiet strength could shake an entire system, stay with us. This story will change the way you see power race and who truly holds control. She thought it was just another traffic stop until the woman she pulled over flashed a badge that could end her career. What happened next didn't just shake one officer. It exposed an entire system. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about what happens when power is challenged and the truth can no longer be ignored. Stay with us, because the ending will change the way you see everything. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. The sky over New Orleans was a painting of quiet fire, deep amber clouds bleeding into dusk streetlights, flickering awake one by one. On Magazine Street, traffic moved slowly, the kind of crawl that made you grateful for your own company. In a silver hybrid sedan, Dr. Simone Hartley, a poised woman in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes and calm strength in her posture, tapped her fingers lightly on the steering wheel. She wasn't in a hurry. After a full day of meetings and a community health workshop, she was heading home. Tired content and unaware that the next 20 minutes would ignite a storm that would shake an entire department to its knees. Behind her, the sudden strobe of red and blue broke the rhythm of the evening. A sharp whoop of the siren, a signal flare of authority. Aaliyah's eyes darted to the rear-view mirror. A police cruiser. No panic, just a reflexive tension in her shoulders. She eased the car to the side of the road as she'd been taught, hands visible, posture relaxed. The officer approached slowly, young blonde, mirrored sunglasses still on despite the fading light. Officer Rachel Whitmore, the kind of officer who walked with the weight of unquestioned power. She didn't ask how Dr. Simone Hartley was doing. She didn't offer an explanation. She just barked. License and registration. Dr. Simone Hartley complied silently, her heart rate steady. There was no offense she could think of. She hadn't been speeding, hadn't run a light. But she knew from experience that offense didn't always factor in. She handed over her credentials, her eyes locking with Officer Rachel Whitmore as what she saw in those eyes was not suspicion, it was presumption. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Officer Rachel Whitmore asked, her voice taut with something that wasn't quite professionalism. "I'm afraid I don't, officer," Dr. Simone Hartley answered. "You were weaving. Looked like you might be intoxicated." Officer Rachel Whitmore replied quickly. Too quickly. The words didn't match the calm professionalism Dr. Simone Hartley carried, nor the unblemished state of her driving. Officer Rachel Whitmore's eyes scanned the inside of the car. They lingered on Aaliyah's briefcase, on her clothes, on her skin. What happened next would seem almost surreal in hindsight. Officer Doyle asked her to step out. Aaliyah, still composed, inquired why. The answer came laced with something darker than protocol. "You fit a description," Officer Rachel Whitmore said. The phrase was like a match striking dry tinder, vague, loaded, weaponized. Aaliyah's calm started to shift, not into fear, but into something else. Recognition. This wasn't a stop. It was a warning disguised as procedure. And yet Dr. Simone Hartley stepped out, hands visible. She wasn't here to escalate, but neither was she here to bend. "You sure this car is yours?" Officer Rachel Whitmore asked, circling the sedan, her hand casually drifting toward her belt. A gesture that wasn't threatening yet, but could be. "You live around here." Dr. Simone Hartley didn't answer the question. Instead, she watched Officer Rachel Whitmore. Really watched her. The way Officer Rachel Whitmore scanned for something, anything that could justify what she already believed, the way her authority wasn't rooted in evidence but instinct. And that instinct, Dr. Simone Hartley could see now, had nothing to do with traffic law. There was no smell of alcohol, no slurred words, no sign of impairment. But Officer Rachel Whitmore asked anyway. Then she requested to search the car. No warrant, no real reason, just the kind of entitlement that believed silence equaled consent. That's when Dr. Simone Hartley spoke. Calm, measured, clear. "I'm not giving you permission to search my vehicle." Officer Rachel Whitmore stiffened. The moment fractured. The narrative she'd been building in her mind now had a crack. Someone who knew the law. Someone who wouldn't be boxed in. That didn't sit well. So she escalated. "Ma'am, you're acting defensive. If you don't have anything to hide, I have everything to protect," Dr. Simone Hartley said. And there was steel in her voice now. "And one of those things is my rights." For the first time, Officer Rachel Whitmore hesitated. It was subtle, a flicker in her posture, a pause in her next step. And it was in that tiny breath of uncertainty that everything began to shift. Because what Officer Doyle didn't know, what she was about to learn in the most public, unforgettable way, was that the woman standing before her was not just any commuter. Dr. Simone Hartley was the newly appointed Director of Internal Affairs for the Louisiana State Police Oversight Commission. The very person responsible for reviewing, investigating, and when necessary, dismantling the systems of power that officers like Officer Rachel Whitmore had grown far too comfortable abusing. And Officer Rachel Whitmore had just triggered her own reckoning. But Dr. Simone Hartley didn't reveal that. Not yet. The moment wasn't ready. The air was still thick with something electric. Tension, indignation, and the weight of history stretching behind them like a shadow neither of them had created. But both now stood inside. Somewhere between fear and fury, a choice would be made. And what came next would expose far more than just a routine stop. It would unmask the wounds beneath the badge. The question was, would anyone be brave enough to look? The wind had begun to pick up as twilight settled over New Orleans, whispering through the trees like a warning that no one could quite hear. Officer Rachel Whitmore stood next to her cruiser, hand resting against the door. Eyes still fixed on Dr. Simone Hartley, with a mixture of unease and resolve. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Not with Aaliyah, but with how this was playing out. The woman hadn't flinched, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't cowed like people usually did when Officer Rachel Whitmore asserted control. Instead, she stood still like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. And yet Officer Rachel Whitmore wasn't ready to walk away. Not because there was probable cause, but because there was pride. That unspoken rule of power. Never back down first. "You got somewhere important to be?" Officer Rachel Whitmore asked, trying to inject sarcasm into her voice. But it came out more brittle than she'd intended. Dr. Simone Hartley glanced at her watch, then back at Officer Rachel Whitmore with a calm, unreadable expression. "Actually, I do." "Then, maybe you should have driven more carefully," Officer Rachel Whitmore said, but the barb landed weakly. There was a pause long enough to make Officer Rachel Whitmore shift slightly. And then, Dr. Simone Hartley moved not toward her car, but toward her briefcase, which still sat in the passenger seat. Officer Rachel Whitmore's body tensed instinctively, her hand hovering over her belt again. "Don't make any sudden moves," she warned, voice sharper than before. Dr. Simone Hartley turned slowly, her tone even. I'm reaching for my identification, the one that matters. Officer Rachel Whitmore raised an eyebrow. We've already been through this. Not that ID, Dr. Simone Hartley said, the one that explains everything. She reached inside and pulled out a black leather wallet, flipping it open with practiced ease. There, gleaming beneath the soft dome light of the car, was a polished badge stamped with the seal of the state of Louisiana. Officer Rachel Whitmore leaned in instinctively to read it, her eyes scanning the credentials before the words registered in her brain. Dr. Simone Hartley, Director, Internal Affairs Division, Louisiana State Police Oversight Commission. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Officer Rachel Whitmore blinked. She took an involuntary step back, as if the badge had emitted some kind of physical force. Her throat went dry. This wasn't just a senior administrator or a well-connected civilian. This was the woman who signed off on misconduct investigations, who had the authority to subpoena officers, recommend terminations, restructure precinct leadership. This was the last person any patrol cop wanted to cross, and she had just done exactly that. Under streetlights and body cameras on a quiet Thursday evening for no real reason at all. The silence between them thickened. Officer Rachel Whitmore started, but nothing coherent followed. Dr. Simone Hartley gently closed the badge holder, slipping it back into her bag like it wasn't a declaration of war. She didn't gloat, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Officer Rachel Whitmore with something far heavier than contempt. Disappointment. Do you know how many reports have crossed my desk about this district? Dr. Simone Hartley asked, her voice quiet. How many names I've seen in complaints that vanish before they get logged into the system? How many videos malfunction on nights just like this? Officer Rachel Whitmore swallowed. Her mind raced, trying to recall every word she'd said, every assumption she'd made. It felt like trying to rewrite a script that had already aired live on national television. You thought I was just another black woman who wouldn't know her rights, Doctor. Simone Hartley continued, not accusatory, just stating a fact. You thought my calm was ignorance, that my silence was fear. It's not like that, Officer Rachel Whitmore said too quickly. I didn't know. You didn't care, Dr. Simone Hartley corrected. And this time, her voice held a note of steel. That's the problem. You didn't ask. You didn't verify. You made up your mind the moment you saw me. That's what I'll be writing in my report. Officer Rachel Whitmore's breath caught. There's no need to report this, she said, and instantly knew it was the wrong thing to say. No need. Dr. Simone Hartley echoed, her eyes narrowing. Let me ask you this. If I hadn't revealed who I was, where would we be right now? Would I be in cuffs in the back of your car? Would you be combing through my trunk for something? Anything to justify your instinct. Officer Rachel Whitmore didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was too loud to ignore now. Doctor, Simone Hartley stepped away from the car, standing beneath the glow of the streetlight. Do you understand the magnitude of what just happened? You weren't just profiling a citizen. You were profiling your supervisor. That word, supervisor, landed like a sledgehammer. Officer Rachel Whitmore had been trained on chain of command. She'd memorized policy manuals, attended briefings, and yet none of it had stopped her from seeing Dr. Simone Hartley as a threat first and a person second. I'm not here to destroy your career, Officer Doyle, Dr. Simone Hartley said after a pause, but I won't ignore what happened, because if you treated me this way, I have no doubt you've treated others worse. People without titles, without shields, without recourse. Officer Rachel Whitmore looked away, shame creeping up her spine like a cold draft. Her voice came small. What happens now? Dr. Simone Hartley didn't respond right away. She let the silence linger. Let the weight of it sit on Officer Rachel Whitmore, his shoulders like armor too heavy for the role she thought she was playing. What happens now, Dr. Simone Hartley said finally, is that I go home. You return to your cruiser, and tomorrow morning we begin a very public conversation about what accountability actually looks like in this department." She turned then, unlocking her car door and Officer Doyle. She added, not turning back, "Next time when you feel that instinct telling you to assert control, ask yourself if it's about safety or about ego. Because tonight, it almost cost you more than just embarrassment." Officer Rachel Whitmore stood frozen, watching the taillights of Aaliyah's car fade into the distance, the sounds of the city humming back into existence around her. She had stopped a woman she thought she understood in a matter of seconds. But the woman she had stopped had just redefined everything she believed about who held the real power in that uniform. By sunrise the next morning, the incident that had taken place on a quiet New Orleans street had already begun to ripple through the highest levels of the state's law enforcement system. Dr. Simone Hartley sat behind her desk at the Louisiana State Police Oversight Commission, the morning light slicing through the blinds and thin golden beams. A mug of untouched coffee cooled beside a manila folder marked Doyle M. Her expression was unreadable, but beneath her composed exterior something simmered. She wasn't angry, not in the conventional sense. Anger had long ago turned into something sharper, more focused. She had spent years walking into rooms where her presence sparked questions before she even spoke. Now she held a seat at the table. And yet moments like the one from last night reminded her that no title could shield someone from the assumptions born of bias. She opened the folder. Officer Rachel Whitmore's record wasn't clean, but it wasn't egregious either. It was typical of few citizen complaints that had been chalked up to misunderstandings, a suspension 3 years ago for excessive tone during a traffic stop. Nothing major, nothing unusual. But that was the problem. It all blended into the background noise of a system too used to protecting itself. The incident from the night before wouldn't have stood out if not for who Dr. Simone Hartley was. That reality was what troubled her the most. It wasn't that she wanted to punish Officer Rachel Whitmore. Dr. Simone Hartley believed in growth and accountability and the potential for transformation. But change didn't come from silence. It didn't come from letting things slide because they weren't that bad. It came from naming the patterns, especially the ones everyone had learned to ignore. Her assistant, Tasha Green, poked her head in. "You ready for the call?" Dr. Simone Hartley nodded, standing to smooth out the lines of her navy blue suit. "Patch them through." Moments later, she was seated across from a flat-screen monitor facing a grid of familiar faces. District commanders, oversight advisors, the state attorney's liaison, and Chief Denise Holloway of the New Orleans Police Department. Chief Kendrick's silver-streaked hair was pulled into a bun, her eyes sharp and expectant. "We've all read your preliminary report," Kendrick began. "Let me say up front, we're aware that what happened is serious, but we also need clarity. Was this about race rank or personality conflict?" Dr. Simone Hartley didn't flinch. "It was about perception," she said. "About what happens when an officer meets someone they don't expect to be in control, and how quickly that encounter shifts from protection to suspicion when that person doesn't conform to expectation." The screen was silent. Some nodded, others looked down uncomfortable. "I didn't reveal my identity at first," she continued. "I did that intentionally because I wanted to see what Officer Doyle would do when faced with a black woman who asked questions instead of apologizing. And what she did, Chief, was escalate unnecessarily. She didn't touch you or draw a weapon, correct? Someone from legal asked." "No," Dr. Simone Hartley said, "but escalation isn't always physical. It's in the tone, the demand for obedience, the refusal to explain. It's the body language the subtle dominance plays. It's deciding someone is a problem before they've done anything at all." Chief Kendrick leaned forward. "So, what are you asking us to do?" Then she said, "I'm asking you not to make this just about one officer. I want a formal audit of field conduct in the 8th Precinct body cam footage, complaint records, traffic stop patterns. If Officer Doyle's behavior is part of a pattern, we need to know." A murmur rippled across the room. And if it's not, Kendrick asked, then she needs retraining and mentoring, not punishment, Dr. Simone Hartley replied. This isn't about destroying careers. It's about making the culture safer for everyone, officers and civilians alike. A long pause followed. Then Kendrick exhaled. You'll get what you need. I'll greenlight the audit, but we'll need support from your office to handle the press when this goes public. I'm prepared for that, Dr. Simone Hartley said. The call ended. The screen faded to black. Alone again in her office, Dr. Simone Hartley looked down at the folder one last time before closing it. What happened between her and Officer Rachel Whitmore wasn't just about that one moment. It was an echo of countless unseen moments happening every day to people with no title, no badge, no recourse. And unless the system faced itself in the mirror, those echoes would never stop repeating. She reached for her coffee, now cold. No matter. The work ahead would keep her wide awake. By sunrise the next morning, the incident that had taken place on a quiet New Orleans street had already begun to ripple through the highest levels of the state's law enforcement system. Dr. Simone Hartley sat behind her desk at the Louisiana State Police Oversight Commission. The morning light slicing through the blinds and thin golden beams. A mug of untouched coffee cooled beside a manila folder marked Doyle M. Her expression was unreadable, but beneath her composed exterior something simmered. She wasn't angry. Not in the conventional sense. Anger had long ago turned into something sharper, more focused. She had spent years walking into rooms where her presence sparked questions before she even spoke. Now she held a seat at the table, and yet moments like the one from last night reminded her that no title could shield someone from the assumptions born of bias. She opened the folder. Officer Rachel Whitmore's record wasn't clean, but it wasn't egregious either. It was typical. A few citizen complaints that had been chalked up to misunderstandings. A suspension 3 years ago for excessive tone during a traffic stop. Nothing major, nothing unusual. But that was the problem. It all blended into the background noise of a system too used to protecting itself. The incident from the night before wouldn't have stood out if not for who Dr. Simone Hartley was. That reality was what troubled her the most. It wasn't that she wanted to punish Officer Rachel Whitmore. Alalia believed in growth, in accountability, in the potential for transformation. But change didn't come from silence. It didn't come from letting things slide because they weren't that bad. It came from naming the patterns, especially the ones everyone had learned to ignore. Her assistant Tasha Green poked her head in. "You ready for the call, Doctor?" Simone Hartley nodded, standing to smooth out the lines of her navy blue suit. "Patch them through." Moments later, she was seated across from a flat-screen monitor facing a grid of familiar faces. District commanders, oversight advisors, the state attorney's liaison, and Chief Denise Holloway of the New Orleans Police Department. Chief Kendrick's silver stree hair was pulled into a bun, her eyes sharp and expectant. "We've all read your preliminary report," Kendrick began. "Let me say up front we're aware that what happened is serious, but we also need clarity. Was this about race rank or personality conflict?" Dr. Simone Hartley didn't flinch. "It was about perception," she said. "About what happens when an officer meets someone they don't expect to be in control and how quickly that encounter shifts from protection to suspicion when that person doesn't conform to expectation." The screen was silent. Some nodded. Others looked down, uncomfortable. "I didn't reveal my identity at first," she continued. "I did that intentionally because I wanted to see what Officer Doyle would do when faced with a black woman who asked questions instead of apologizing. And what she did, Chief, was escalate unnecessarily. She didn't touch you or draw a weapon, correct?" Someone from legal asked. "No," Dr. Simone Hartley said, "but escalation isn't always physical. It's in the tone, the demand for obedience, the refusal to explain. It's the body language the subtle dominance plays. It's deciding someone is a problem before they've done anything at all." Chief Kendrick leaned forward. "So what are you asking us to do?" Dr. Simone Hartley let the question sit for a second. Then she said, "I'm asking you not to make this just about one officer. I want a formal audit of field conduct in the 8th Precinct. Body cam footage, complaint records, traffic stop patterns. If Officer Doyle's behavior is part of a pattern, we need to know." A murmur rippled across the room. "And if it's not," Kendrick asked, "then she needs retraining and mentoring, not punishment," Dr. Simone Hartley replied. "This isn't about destroying careers. It's about making the culture safer for everyone, officers and civilians alike." A long pause followed. Then Kendrick exhaled. "You'll get what you need. I'll greenlight the audit, but we'll need support from your office to handle the press when this goes public." "I'm prepared for that," Dr. Simone Hartley said. The call ended. The screen faded to black. Alone again in her office, Dr. Simone Hartley looked down at the folder one last time before closing it. What happened between her and Officer Rachel Whitmore wasn't just about that one moment. It was an echo of countless unseen moments happening every day to people with no title, no badge, no recourse. And unless the system faced itself in the mirror, those echoes would never stop repeating. She reached for her coffee, now cold. No matter. The work ahead would keep her wide awake. 2 weeks later, the New Orleans Police Department hosted a closed-door training session in the community room of a local library. Not a sterile conference room or a press-staged auditorium, but a place designed for conversation. The air inside was warm, tinged with the scent of old books and fresh coffee. Officer Rachel Whitmore sat stiffly near the back arms, folded, unsure of what to expect. The email had said, "restorative dialogue and bias awareness." But to her it sounded like punishment wrapped in corporate jargon. She didn't know if she was angry or embarrassed. Both, probably. The headlines had died down, and the department had quietly contained the fallout, but whispers remained. Some accusing her of misconduct, others painting her as a scapegoat. The truth, as always, was messier. She had made assumptions. She had escalated unnecessarily. She'd let her instincts speak louder than her training, and it had cost her more than just reputation. It had shaken the very foundation of what she thought she stood for. At the front of the room, Dr. Simone Hartley stood with her hands folded gently in front of her. She wasn't in uniform. No badge, no blazer, just a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. There was something intentional in her appearance. She wasn't here as a figure of authority. She was here as a witness. "I want to talk to you all today," Dr. Simone Hartley began, not as the head of internal oversight, but as someone who's lived on both sides of the badge. There was no slideshow, no lengthy policy review, just her voice steady, intentional. "I've been stopped, questioned, watched more than heard. I've felt suspicion rise before I've even spoken a word. And yet I've also worn the title, signed, the orders, led the reviews. I've read every report you hope no one sees. What I've learned is this: trust isn't built through orders or apologies. It's built through understanding what you don't see." Officer Rachel Whitmore shifted in her seat. Her chest tightened, not because the words were accusatory, but because they weren't. Dr. Simone Hartley wasn't attacking her. She was inviting her in. One by one, officers shared their own stories, moments of pride, moments of shame. One Latino officer recalled the first time he watched his own cousin get pulled over and instinctively feared for him. Another, a white veteran nearing retirement, admitted how often he'd mistaken confidence in a black man for aggression. The room, once cold with silence, began to hum with something different. Reflection. Then, Dr. Simone Hartley asked the question that changed everything. "When was the last time someone treated you like you didn't belong?" The words hung in the air. Officer Rachel Whitmore didn't speak, but her mind reeled. It took her back to her academy days when she was one of only 3 women in her class, constantly having to prove herself not by competence, but by tone, by smile, by silence. She remembered the time she was left out of a key tactical training drill because the instructor assumed she wasn't strong enough to handle the gear. She hadn't said anything. She'd internalized it. And now she understood. She'd done the same thing. Passed a judgment without giving space for truth. Later, as the room broke into smaller circles, Dr. Simone Hartley approached her. She didn't sit. She didn't lecture. She simply asked, "Can I speak with you?" Officer Rachel Whitmore nodded slowly. "I want you to know," Dr. Simone Hartley said gently, "I didn't push for disciplinary action because I wanted to ruin your career. I did it because I believe you can be better than what happened that night." Officer Rachel Whitmore's throat tightened. I didn't see you for who you were." Dr. Simone Hartley nodded. "And that's exactly the problem. Not that you didn't see my title, but that the absence of it changed how you treated me." "I know," Officer Rachel Whitmore whispered, "and I hate that I did it." Dr. Simone Hartley sat down beside her, her voice low. "You can't change what happened, but you can decide who you're going to be after it." Officer Rachel Whitmore looked at her not with defiance, not with shame, but with clarity. "Then I want to start now." They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands. There was no grand gesture. Just two women sitting side by side in silence with the quiet understanding that trust wasn't about forgetting. It was about what came next. That night, Officer Rachel Whitmore walked out of the library and into the cooling air of New Orleans with something she hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. Not the kind that came from duty or rank, but the kind that came from knowing she had the power to rebuild what she once broke. And that was the beginning of something new. 3 months after that fateful traffic stop, the New Orleans Police Department launched a new program called Perspective in Practice. It wasn't a rebranding. It wasn't a PR move. It was the beginning of a reckoning, a way forward, crafted from the truth, that spilled out in a moment of mistaken identity, of assumption of power misused. And at the center of it stood two women whose lives had collided under the most unlikely of circumstances. Dr. Simone Hartley didn't seek the spotlight when she authored the internal report. She simply wrote what needed to be said. Her words were blunt not to shame, but to illuminate. A failure of perception leads to a failure of service. The uniform does not give us license to assume. It demands we look deeper. She pushed not just for departmental reform, but for cultural change. And the chief, to his credit, listened. The city listened. In the weeks following, training protocols shifted. Community liaison were brought in. And perhaps most powerfully, the department began hosting a monthly event, unscripted sessions. Officers and civilians met off-duty without rank or hierarchy to talk, not debate, not defend, but understand. Officer Rachel Whitmore attended everyone. At first, she was met with quiet glances, some skeptical, some cautious. But she didn't flinch. She listened. And when it was her turn to speak, she didn't try to explain away what happened. She owned it. "I looked at someone," she once said during a session, "and I saw a risk instead of a person. I let fear fill in the blanks. I never stopped to check, and I'm not proud of it. But I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen again. Not on my watch, not in my city." The people in the room didn't applaud. They didn't have to. They nodded. And that meant more than any standing ovation ever could. For Aaliyah, watching Officer Rachel Whitmore speak was a reminder that even broken moments can birth something better. She'd spent her career buried in policy and paper trails, chasing change from behind a desk. But this was different. This was what happened when accountability wasn't just about consequences, but about what you choose to do after them. One morning, she and Officer Rachel Whitmore walked the French Market together. An impromptu coffee break turned quiet reflection. Vendors greeted them with casual waves. No one knew the history between them. They looked like colleagues, maybe even friends. And in a way they were, not because they agreed on everything, but because they had chosen not to let one moment define them. "I still think about that night," Officer Rachel Whitmore said, sipping her coffee. "I do too," Dr. Simone Hartley replied. "But not because of what happened, because of what came next." Officer Rachel Whitmore nodded slowly. "I used to believe impact didn't matter if your intentions were good, but I've learned that intentions don't undo harm." Dr. Simone Hartley smiled faintly. And accountability doesn't erase you. It reveals you. They paused at a small bench beneath the shade of a sprawling oak tree. Tourists passed by, unaware that history in its quietest form had been written in moments just like this. A conversation, a shared silence, a bridge rebuilt. Back at headquarters, a new directive was being finalized, a civilian oversight board with real power, shaped in part by Aaliyah's recommendations and Officer Rachel Whitmore's testimony. It wasn't just a win for justice, it was a blueprint for trust. Their story wasn't plastered across billboards. It didn't trend. But in homes, on streets, in patrol cars, and church halls, it sparked conversations, difficult ones, necessary ones. And that's how change begins. Not with grand gestures, but with people choosing to show up differently. From conflict came clarity. From pain came perspective, and from a single stop came a movement. Because justice, when done right, isn't about who's right. It's about what's right, and that made all the difference. In the heart of New Orleans, what began as a seemingly routine traffic stop became the flashpoint of an extraordinary story, one that peeled back the layers of institutional assumption, personal accountability, and the power of transformation. Officer Rachel Whitmore thought she was in control that day, pulling over a woman she wrongly suspected based on nothing more than gut instinct and implicit bias. What she didn't know was that the calm, composed woman behind the wheel, Dr. Simone Hartley, was not just any citizen. She was the head of internal affairs for the department Officer Rachel Whitmore served. Their encounter should have been forgettable. Instead, it became unforgettable, a test of character, a mirror held up to the very system they both served. Officer Rachel Whitmore's actions, born from conditioned response rather than clear judgment, unraveled quickly once Dr. Simone Hartley revealed her identity. But the true power of this story didn't lie in the dramatic reversal of roles. It lay in what happened after. Dr. Simone Hartley didn't retaliate with rage. She responded with clarity, integrity, and the quiet conviction of someone who understood that real change doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from vision. She didn't just hold Officer Rachel Whitmore accountable. She held the entire department to a higher standard. And instead of retreating into shame, Officer Rachel Whitmore stepped forward. She chose growth over ego, truth over denial, and became a voice for reform inside the force. Together, these two women, once on opposite sides of a badge, helped shape a new culture. They turned tension into transformation. A simple mistake became a meaningful movement, and their story became a catalyst for a system to finally look inward. The lesson here is profound. It is not enough to wear the uniform or hold the title. What matters is the courage to confront your own blind spots, the humility to admit when you've gone wrong, and the commitment to do better. Not just for yourself, but for those you serve. We live in a world where assumptions move faster than facts, where silence often follows injustice, and where trust, once broken, can feel impossible to rebuild. But Dr. Simone Hartley and Officer Rachel Whitmore's journey reminds us that redemption is possible when we face discomfort with honesty, when we listen as deeply as we speak, and when we choose accountability over appearances. Let their story challenge you to see beyond first impressions. Let it inspire you to speak up when it matters. And most importantly, let it be a call to action in your workplace, in your community, and in your heart. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it gave you hope that change is not only possible but necessary, then we invite you to be part of that change. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that shine light in hard places. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating content that matters. Let's keep the conversation going, because justice, empathy, and truth should never go out of style. In the end, it wasn't the badge that made her powerful. It was her calm, her clarity, and the courage to stand tall when she had every reason to shrink. This wasn't just about one cop, one stop, or one badge. It was about what happens when someone dares to say, "No more." And when accountability becomes more than just a buzzword, it becomes a mirror. But now we turn it over to you. Do you believe that internal reform is enough, or is the system too broken to fix? Should the officer have been fired or mentored? And here's the hardest one. Would the ending have been different if she hadn't pulled out that badge? We want to hear your voice. Tell us what this story made you feel. Drop your thoughts in the comments whether they challenge or agree. If this story moved you like this video, and if you believe more people need to hear stories that humanize justice and amplify truth, please subscribe to Soulful Stories 4. Because here we don't just tell stories, we start conversations that matter.